What we've heard this morning is in the book of Hebrews, the mission moment. It is the sermon after the sermon, where a particular preacher offers the community a few words about what the community is doing and ought to be doing in the future. Now, we don't know much about the book of Hebrews, this book in the New Testament. We don't actually know who wrote it. We don't know exactly where it was written, and we don't even know when it was written. Likely between the years 60 and 100. That's about as narrow of a time range as we can get it. What we do know is that the author, who is a preacher, takes the opportunity to craft a sermon to a particular community, but not just any sermon, a sermon for people who are going through some quite serious faith fatigue. Many, or is it most, churches have been through this kind of thing before. Energy has ebbed. The folks in the pews feel like they have done enough or they are doing enough. They are tired of feeling a little bit peculiar, like why aren't they doing what everyone else does on a Sunday morning? Why do they have to be up early to get things ready for coffee hour? Why do they have to be here in order to light the candles? They couldn't do any more. They couldn't give any more while the preacher is up in the pulpit telling the folks in the pews, come on, dig deeper, do more, give more, pray more, learn more, always, always more from the pulpit, more service, more praying, more learning, more studying, more giving, always more. And at some point, you just can't squeeze blood from a stone. And so, quite possibly, the audience for this sermon from the preacher of the book of Hebrews is whispering to each other, hey, next Sunday, you going to make it, or are you going to sleep in a little late? You going to the market next time? You going to take a week off, month off, year off? How you feeling? And so the preacher does not charge in the book of Hebrews with the message to the people of more, but rather a message of faith. The preacher does not offer conflict management techniques. He does not hire a consultant. He does not offer ways on how to update the music or improve the AV system. There aren't any focus groups. But in quite academic terms, he sets out to talk about the nature and meaning of faith. What we have in chapter 13, where the sermon has pretty much wound down, is now the moment for mission, or in our service flow, the call for the offering. Some things are added for simplicity and brevity, for folks to hear a good word before they get ready to go on their way. And so it is almost certainly a he, says, let mutual love continue. He offers a word for hospitality, contentment, overcoming fear. There's nothing you can't do because you'll never be forsaken. What can anyone do to me? Amen. Have you become frustrated, really frustrated, by trying to debate people these days? I mean, didn't it used to be? I'm going to sound really old now. Didn't it used to be that you would cede your point to the person that was the most well-read on a topic, or who had covered a piece of the story that you hadn't, or had sorted out the pieces of information you were going to use as you engaged in debate? I remember sitting on the school bus in 8th grade. Kids were forever debating about who or what was the best. Baseball was a common topic in the spring. Danny Tartabull was better than Ken Griffey Jr., right? I went to school with a lot of Yankees fans. Ryan Sandberg was better than this guy. And you could pull out some kind of metrics. He hit 298 or 30 home runs, or he stole this many bases. He's faster because you know he stole this many bases. And even in politics, it was like, hey, such and such was a better president because he got us into or out of such and such mess, and unemployment was blank. Okay, we understand the rules of the game. And it's probably not quite true. It was more complex than that. But now that generation of people, my generation of people, has grown up to hear that baseball player X is better than player Y because, well, why? What reason would you like to give? What fact would you like to offer? What piece of data would you like to share? There is a great deal of difference, isn't there, between truth and facts and data. Farhad Manjoo wrote a book called True Enough all the way back in 2008. Many of us are familiar with Stephen Colbert's term truthiness. Manjoo's book was talking about life in what he called a post-fact society. William Davies, who teaches at the University of London, wrote an op-ed in the Times this week called The Age of Post-Truth Politics. What is post-truth or even post-fact? It is a time when one can employ data that is constantly being mined for any purpose that might suit your agenda, whether that is economic, political, or social, or religious. Davies wrote, "We're in the middle of a transition from a society of facts to a society of data. During this interim, confusion abounds surrounding the exact status of knowledge and numbers in public life, exacerbating the sense that truth itself is being abandoned. Is it any wonder that some folks in our society feel overwhelmed or disillusioned if you don't even know what's true? If you are an adult and a child is looking at you for truth or facts or data, and you're saying to yourself, I'm not even sure what truth is anymore. I don't even know where to go for that truth. Davies continues, the promise of facts is to settle arguments between warring perspectives and simplify the issues. Politicians might disagree over the right economic policy, but if they can agree that the economy has grown 2%, there is at least a shared stable reality. But the promise of data, by contrast, is to sense shifts in public sentiment. By analyzing Twitter using algorithms, it is possible to get real-time updates on how a given person is being perceived. This produces some chilling possibilities. Once numbers are viewed as sentiment rather than as statements about reality, how are we to achieve any consensus on the nature of social, economic, and environmental problems? Conspiracy theories prosper under these conditions. What was amazing to me was I read that, and I was thinking about it. I jumped in the car. I was going to pick up my children at camp. I turned on the radio, and the first thing I heard was an interview with one of the producers of the recently canceled TV show, The Nightly Show. This producer was discussing the end of the show, and she was asked by someone if she felt like the ratings were poor because white people were not watching the show. White people were not willing to engage in conversations about race, a very heady topic. And the producer replied, her response to this question was, quote, there are lots of white middle-aged people who have posted on their Facebook page telling them that they loved the show. As if that were a fact about their ratings. What are we talking about when we talk about a truth and reality and we cover that or counter that with data that some white people wrote on our Facebook page? Now, I'm not knocking that person. I'm merely suggesting that this is evidence of using a data set that does not tell you the whole story. The Supreme Court of the United States doesn't do any better. In 2013, Stephen Breyer cited an amicus brief to establish that American libraries hold 200 million books that were published abroad, a point of some significance in the copyright dispute before the court. He got that figure from a blog post. That blog has been discontinued. So there is truth, and there are facts, and there are internet facts, and there is data. And no wonder plenty of folks seem kind of tired or disillusioned or miffed or even angry. But it is not just the internet, and it is not just politicians, and it is not just Supreme Court justices. It is not them at all. We all have, as human beings, a loose relationship with the truth, much looser than we would care to admit. Just the other day, I called a family member of mine, and they were not home. And so the phone rang out, the voicemail message began, and it said, "Sorry to have missed your call. Please leave us a message, and we will call you back just as soon as we can." That is a lie. What you are going to do is call me back sometime between the next 1 and 72 hours, depending on the tone of my message. Was I saying, "Help, help, help," or, just call and say, "Hello, what's up, how's it going?" And what else you've got going on in your life. How stressed out are you? Are you really busy? So the reality is when you call me back after 72 hours has elapsed, you're going to tell me that you've been running around like crazy, that you've been really busy. "Sorry, it's taken me 3 days to give you a call back. Thanks for the message," etc., etc. But the reality also is that as much as you might have lied in saying that you are going to call me back just as soon as you can, I want you to lie to me when it has taken 3 days for you to call me back. I don't want you to tell me it took 3 days for you to call me back because the last 2 times we talked, I complained a lot, and you had a lot going on that day, and you just didn't feel like listening to me complain for the 3rd conversation in a row. So you put it off for a couple of days because that was just much easier for you. I want you to tell me that lie. I do not need to hear that I am a complainer or a whiner. I want to pretend that I am a decent human being who isn't complaining about nothing in particular every time we talk. So please lie to me. Please keep on saying that you'll call me back just as soon as you can. This is perfectly acceptable to me. One of the important truths about life and the world is that the world is not divided into a lot of honest people and a small amount of people who lie a lot. This is what we pretend happens every time a Ponzi scheme is uncovered. The world, in fact, may well be comprised of a lot of people who lie a little and a few people who lie a lot. But the reality is that we are recipients of somewhere between 10 and 200 lies every day. We tell many small lies every day to help people feel better, to negotiate life. We know the old one. How do I look? Fantastic. I am getting to my point, a theological point shortly. There was a study done at MIT led by Dan Ariely. He did a TED Talk about this. He's a professor of psychology at Duke, and he studies cheating and why we do it. He asked a group of people, half of them to write down 10 books that they read in high school, and for the other half to write down as many of the 10 Commandments as they could recall. People were given ample opportunity by the testers to cheat. What they found was that as people were asked to write the 10 Commandments down, some of them could get 1 and some of them could get 9, that they didn't cheat, though. If they only knew 1, they just wrote down 1. And it's not that the people who are religious don't cheat. It's just that the people who ran the test asked everyone who was to write down the 10 Commandments to sign the MIT honor code before they took the test. Which is interesting because MIT does not have an honor code. But nevertheless, the point might remain. Not that if you learn the 10 Commandments, you will be a moral person, but that when given the opportunity to have an anchor point, you respond differently to the world. You sign the honor code and then you look at a test differently. If you're given an anchor point of integrity, you tend to be a person that offers integrity to the next person that you see, or to your family, your friends, or even strangers that you might meet on the street. If you have an anchor point that asks for honesty, you tend to be honest. If you have an anchor point that is centered on prayer, the interior life, the spiritual, the divine, you will tend to go back to that stuff throughout the course of your day. This is why the author of Hebrews finishes his mission moment, his sermon after the sermon, with a call to hospitality, by encouraging people to create anchor points in their minds and in their spirits where they say on a regular basis, oh my goodness, when I invited that person into my home, I might have entertained angels. Oh my gosh, look at my money. It is a tool to be used, but loving it or to be in love with it is an act of devotion that I do not wish to entertain. I do not wish for money to rule my life. Oh my gosh. What can anyone do to me? What kind of things might happen in our lives if we were able to make that kind of affirmation on a regular basis? What could another human being do to me? I must never neglect to do the good, we are told. The author, the preacher of Hebrews, offers the people a whole different set of anchor points for their lives and their lives of faith. And this is why we in the church have someone like Betsy talk often about childhood spiritual development and it being critical not just for our children, but also for the parents of those children, because that spiritual development is an anchor point for a family. This is why I think coming to church is vastly underrated in our contemporary culture, because coming to church on a Sunday morning in your free time, in your relaxation time, creates an anchor point for your week. This is why prayer isn't just about, or it isn't at all about getting stuff. It is a matter of attuning yourself or being anchored in and with the Creator. This is why the preacher of Hebrews speaks and still speaks to us. Because he speaks with surprise and wonder and gratitude. These are the anchor points that lead to joy and to love and to lives well lived. In the face of our culture, isn't that refreshing? May God's peace be with you all.